the parking lots.
Tonight, the FBI and ATF now investigating multiple cases of possible arson targeting Teslas and Cybertrucks.
This dramatic video shows multiple cars in flames. Police say the attacker used Molotov cocktails. It's the latest in more than a dozen instances of arson and vandalism targeting Tesla.
The same suspect shot more Teslas with a gun. Tesla Cybertrucks were set on fire in Kansas City, and earlier this month, shots fired at a Tesla dealership in Oregon. Cybertrucks on fire in Seattle.
Wow, you guys like petty acts of domestic terrorism, huh? Jim, they're taking...
When I tell you that I'm angry today, it's because I'm angry and frustrated today, and I went for a jog, and I figure I'll listen to the latest from Gad Saad, and it just so happened that the episode that I turned on was a list of things that are pissing off Gad Saad. And I tell you, there's nothing like jogging and grinding your teeth at the same time. We're going to get into this thoroughly. And I am always very reluctant to draw analogies between current events and, Nazi Germany. But just imagine there's no people that are the victim of this type of property violence, although there are. Imagine a crowd in Germany in 1938 cheering on Kristallnacht. Yeah, a bunch of buildings were broken and the windows burnt. Yeah, the crowd is cheering. And we'll find out if Gad Saad finds that comparison offensive. If you do not know who Gad Saad is, run a poll. There's no poll able to be run. If you do not know who Gad Saad is, put a 1 in the audience. We got Gad Saad coming on. Okay, Gad, come on in now. All right. Gad and I start talking before the show just to make sure the mics are working. I'm like, dude, this is all got to go live. We're gonna wait for him to.
I'm trying to.
There
okay,
you go.
Here we go.
Sir, Gad Saad is now. If you don't know, if you're not following Gad as closely as I'm following him, visiting professor at Northwood University and the global ambassador. The episode that I started before listening to the list of things that are currently pissing you off was your speech at Northwood, but the audio was not as good on my iPhone as...
Oh, no.
No, it wasn't terrible. It was just like, it was an outdoor mic, whereas your podcast is a beautiful microphone. Mr. Gad Saad, for those who may not know who you are, very quickly, and let's get into the list of things that are pissing both of us off.
Well, first, so good to be back with you. Thank you so much. Always a pleasure to be with the vivacious, ebullient, gorgeous Viva Frei. Who am I? I'm a evolutionary behavioral scientist, which basically means I apply evolution to study human behavior. I'm a professor at my home university is in Canada, Concordia University. But as you said, I'm on a leave currently at Northwood University, which is a small but real honey badger university in Michigan, largely focused on business education. It's really a big business school. And I just returned from there yesterday. I was there for the first week of classes. I'm actually teaching a course on the parasitic mind. So that's been really fun. It's been great to interact with the students. And I'm an author, written many books, many academic papers, and so on.
We're going to get into your latest, which has not yet been published, but it's, as I brought up the comment, Suicidal Empathy.
Yes, sir.
What I did get by listening to the portion of the your speech at Northwoods was you have a curriculum for a program, a course that you're currently teaching. How often do you have to go down to teach it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one course is only being taught to professors and staff, which I thought was really cool, very innovative of Northwood to do that, because we also need to inoculate the professors who are spewing all the bullshit to the students. And so on Mondays, I teach a 1.5 hour course to faculty and staff. Only the first course, which was this past Monday, is in person. The other ones are remotely. And then I teach another parasitic mind course, but 8 weeks long, to students, undergraduate students. The first and the 8th week are in person, and the remaining ones in the middle are remotely.
So there is a way that I can possibly sign up for this. I'm going to see if there's a way that I can sign up remotely, because I would love to follow it. Although I think I'm going to pick your brain worth of an entire course today. Everybody who knows you knows of the concept of suicidal empathy. And I mean, it's on steroids now, Gad, but the latest book.
Yes, sir.
When is it going to be released? It's on pre-order now.
Right. Well, it's not yet available for pre-order. It officially, officially meaning by contract, I only have to submit the first draft of the book to my publisher next year. But it has so taken off. It is so timely. And, when Elon Musk keeps publicly tweeting, we need the book ASAP, you sort of drop everything else and focus on it. And so I'm trying to speed up the timeline. So hopefully maybe by the end of 2025, if everything goes well.
Again, I listened to your list of things that are pissing you off, and we'll get into
Sure.
an itemized. It's going to come up, but you have an amazing not an understanding, but way of applying evolutionary psychology to what we're witnessing right now. I'm more simplistic. What I look at propaganda media, and I think it's propaganda media, but we're witnessing now, at least with Elon Musk and this outright war against Tesla. I don't know how you characterize it. Do you think that this actually reflects the sentiment of a substantial portion of the population? Is this brainwashing via media? And if it's one or the other, what in the hell?
So I'm gonna turn and I want to show you a book. I'm giving them. I'm not their publicist. I'm not related to them. Although one of the authors has been on my show. Oh, this way. So this book is called The Enigma of Reason. It's by Hugo Mercier and Dan Sperber, who are two French cognitive psychologists. The book is titled The Enigma of Reason, and you'll see in a second why I'm mentioning it. I actually referenced this book in chapter 7 of The Parasitic Mind. What Mercier and Sperber argue is that human beings did not evolve the capacity to reason in order to seek out some objective truth, but rather they evolved their faculty of reason simply to win arguments. Now, you can see how I'm setting this up for your Elon Musk question. Therefore, when you're seeing the tribalism and the hate that you're seeing, it is a reflection of the fact that when people are evaluating Elon Musk, they're not saying, is he objectively someone who is doing good? But rather, they're trying to make sure that their team wins. When Elon was a billionaire on the side of the Democrats, then he was the greatest green guy and he was doing Tesla and he was a hero of everyone. When he now endorses Donald Trump, all objective metrics cease to exist. He's no longer on our team, therefore he must be Himmler. So again, this book is incredible. And again, I have nothing to do with them, but I think it's a very technical book. It's an academic book, but it's an incredibly powerful book because it really does point to that insight that people simply care about being proven right. That's why you have so many people who will go against Trump, even if 10 minutes earlier, they would have told you that they support the exact same policy that Trump is espousing. The minute that he espouses it, then I'm against it. So that's a very difficult problem to overcome, Viva, because I'm in the business of trying to, inoculate people against stupidity, but knowing that the architecture of the human mind doesn't care about truth and only cares about being proven right, it's a tall order at times.
But then the question is, the book sounds like not to say a long-winded, explaining what we typically refer to as motivated reasoning.
Yes,
you
exactly.
want to come to the conclusion, so you'll twist and bend to make it happen. What is what's the, to use the term, but what's the evolutionary basis? Is this just a question of fitting in with the crowd and the likelihood of survival if there's a certain amount of crowd think?
Yeah, that's a great question. Certainly there is a bit of that, right? We're both a herd animal and an animal that tries to at times differentiate themselves from others. Actually, there's a very interesting paper that was published a few years ago that looked at, and you'll see in a second how I'm going to relate it to what you just asked, that looked at two types of advertising strategies, okay? One type of advertising strategy is called social proofing. So, for example, if I say 6 billion people have been happily served by McDonald's, shouldn't you come to McDonald's? So there's been social proofing, meaning that it's already been tried and tested, so you can try it as well. There's another type of advertising appeal called a scarcity appeal, right? Limited edition, one of only a few. And it turns out that when you prime people for survival, they're much more likely to prefer the social proofing advertising appeal. But when you prime them for mating, they're much more likely to prefer the scarcity appeal. Why? Because when I'm facing a survival threat, then I want to be part of the herd. Therefore, social proofing works. But when I am primed for mating, I want to stand out from all of my competitors. I want the pretty girl to notice me and to see that I'm different from Viva, and therefore the scarcity appeals to me. And therefore, we are an animal that both seeks to at times differentiate ourselves from other and at times be part of the herd.
Okay, that's actually very fascinating. And when we're talking about this type of tribalist us versus them, it is the peer approved method and not the standing out and being the thought leader. I mean, it's another thing that you're trying to crack, I presume. How do you get through to the masses? I mean, well, first of all, let me back it up. Is my analogy to the groupthink of what we just saw in that opening clip and eras of the past where people tolerated, promoted, condoned, and applauded violence? I mean, we're witnessing it right now. Is there any material difference between this level of rationalizing, justifying violence versus historical examples of it?
Right. No, that's another great question. Look, these frailties of the architecture of the human mind are not specific to the current era, right? It is an indelible part of the architecture of the human mind, for example, to be parasitized. The only thing that is specific to the current era are the specific idea pathogens that manifest themselves today, right? So 300 years ago, it would have been perfectly reasonable for us to organize our neighborhood as follows. I think that Linda might be a witch. Let's throw her into some water, see if she actually swims. If she does swim, that proves that she's a witch. And if she drowns, oops, I guess Linda wasn't a witch. And that, hence the Salem witch trials, right? Now, in that time, that parasitic idea made perfect sense. Well, today we have other parasitic ideas. We have postmodernism, we have cultural relativism, we have social constructivism. And so the only thing that is unique about the current time period are the specific forms of parasitic ideas, irrationality, emotional incontinence. But all of these things are an indelible part of the human spirit, unfortunately.
Now you said something, and I'm not sure if I just connected two dots, and it's going to be a novel idea. Salem witch trials. I remember, I don't know where I heard it, that there was some argument theory that there was some sort of mass pollution or mass toxic infection. I think it was because of what people were eating, which made them susceptible to hallucinations and this type of psychological madness. Does that ring any bell with you?
Well, I don't know why, but I am an academic, so I always like to cite others. Here are two books that I'm currently using in my forthcoming book on suicidal empathy. A Colorful History of Popular Delusions. By the way, I didn't prepare these for this talk. It's because I'm working on the book. And then here's another one. Let me read it for you.
Little Green Men.
Mewing Nuns and Headhunting Panics, a study of mass psychogenic illness and social delusion. Now, it could be the case that at times this mass psychogenic illness might actually be rooted in a material infection, but usually the fact that it's mass psychogenetic, it's precisely because there is no material thing. It's a mimetic transfer of a delusion that is not specifically tied, let's say, to a actual nauseous substance, right? And so, but I talk about that in the forthcoming book because I'm trying to demonstrate that there are many forms of mimetic transfers that very quickly happen. So, for example, the idea that suicidal empathy should be something laudable in the West is something that has spread very, very quickly through society.
Mimetic means non-tangible, right? Like thought.
Yeah, that's a great question. So mimetic, the term meme, which we now use in just common parlance, meme was a term that was introduced by Richard Dawkins in his 1976 book called The Selfish Gene, where he was arguing that humans are, of course, both a cultural and biological animal. Well, to the extent that we are a biological animal, our genes propagate. But to the extent that we are a cultural animal, our memes propagate. What is a meme? A meme is anything that can be transferred from one brain to another. So, for example, if I am whistling a jingle, and then you hear it, and now it goes into your brain, you start whistling it. Well, that was a mimetic transfer of a jingle. But if you read my books, I am infecting you with my ideas, my memes. Now, the reason why in the parasitic mind, I didn't use a mimetic framework, but instead used a neuroparasitological framework is because memes don't have any inherent valence to them. They could be positive memes, they could be neutral memes, or they could be negative memes. Whereas when you say neuroparasitic, it is actually zombifying you, right? It is a detriment to the host who is being parasitized to the advantage of the parasite that is altering your neuronal circuitry to suit its reproductive interests.
And by the way, Gad, just so you know, in our locals community, Sophie Agape says the Gad Saad bingo card: wood crickets, suicidal empathy, parasitic mind, Justin Trudeau, Elon Musk, Trump, and Mark Carney. I could add a few, and I told her we're going to get to all of them. No, 'cause the reason I'm asking that is the idea that there's something in the water, and people today have been talking about the effects of plastics and what's the word when they interfere with your there's a word that about microplastics interfering with your
like endocrinological system?
Yes, that's right. And interrupting endocrinological interruption.
Yes.
And I look when you look at you've seen the meme of the fish mouth. Like there's an actual face to what typically ends up being these psycho rabid liberals. Is there some sort of genetic or external component that makes people go off the edge?
Look, there definitely, for example, is proof that, let's say, testosterone is very down, right, for all sorts of, material reasons. But I think the more direct route to that, the castration, if you'd like, is really through the parasitic idea. So it could be a 1-2 punch, right? There could be some elements of what is proverbially or literally in the water. But I think what is causing the castration and the spinelessness that we're seeing is really coming from those ideas. By the way, speaking of that, can I just read for you a tweet that I posted earlier just
Absolutely.
now?
And it was endocrine disruptors was the word I was looking for. Thank you. This was Jessica Rose who mentioned it to me for the first, well, I heard it a few times, but then Jessica Rose got into it and it was amazing. Now, which
Okay,
tweet?
you ready?
Is this going to be about Bill Burr?
Yes, sir.
Okay, because I had that one on the back. I was like, yes. And I got a video of Bill Burr too. We're going to talk about this.
So you ready? I'm going to read it for you. So all the viewing audience enjoy. Dear Bill Burr, I personally know Elon Musk. If you'd like, I can explore with Elon the possibility of how to grow a spine and testicles in the lab, subsequent to which we can offer you those transplant services for free. Please let me know if this is something that might interest you. In the meantime, I hope that you'll return on Rogan's show to make fun of my name. That was a truly hilarious bit that only a comedic genius could come up with. Go, Bill. The level of disdain that I feel for this spineless castrato is immeasurable, right? Like for me to stop writing suicidal empathy so I can go after this guy, because he is the perfect manifestation of what's happened to the West. He is exactly, I mean, of course, Justin Trudeau too, but he is a representation of both the parasitic mind and suicidal empathy, right? I mean, think about the platform that this degenerate has. And all he does all day is go on shows talking about how Elon Musk is a Nazi and so on. And so I had to go after him. I hope you enjoyed that tweet.
Oh no, we're going to get into a little bit more of it because it's a very weird thing with Bill Burr in particular, and I do wonder if social media, the phenomenon of the dopamine rush from the tweet, has actually either infiltrated or exacerbated the awfulness through which people do politics, where instead of it actually being thought out, insightful policy, it's whatever gets the most immediate reaction from the crowd. Bill Burr coming out and not ostensibly, but in reality, promoting violence against billionaires, not realizing that a billionaire to him, he is that much of a billionaire to someone who can't make ends meet. And if the idea that he's going to be promoting summary execution of billionaires because they mistreat the people off of whom they make their money, he's summoning demons in terms of what someone might rationalize doing to him, because to them, he's a billionaire, just, with a little less money, but much more than him. They can only get away with it because they're sheltered from the consequences of the very policy that they promote.
Exactly right. And by the way, one of the things that I've often been asked, are there some disciplines that are academic disciplines that are less likely to be parasitized by all of this nonsense? And the reason I thought about this is because you were saying that they're sheltered by the consequences of their stupidity. Well, the engineering school and the business school are probably the two least parasitized faculties, academic faculties or disciplines, because to your point, they are wedded to reality. There is an autocorrective mechanism whereby if you espouse nonsense, look, you can't build bridges using postmodernist physics because there's this thing called the bridge will collapse. You can't build economic models to understand, whatever, consumer choice or, economic, macroeconomic realities if you use postmodernist mathematics, because a lot of people are probably paying you a lot of money to do those predictions. And if it's based on nonsense, people are going to be upset. So in a sense, the reason why originally many of these idiotic ideas, yes, they all stemmed from academia, but specifically came from things like the humanities and some of the activist fields within the social sciences, is because the professor can get up in front of his gullible group of students, pontificate nonsense without ever facing the slap of reality autocorrecting you. And that's why you saw the proliferation of these ideas completely unencumbered by common sense.
The issue is that Bill Burr's running on the same late night shows that are out there promoting outright terrorism, and so they revel in it. It becomes sort of their niche, and the more they think the audience wants to hear it, the more extreme they get. Like Bill Burr's gone off a freaking cliff within the last 6 months.
He has, and I mean, I never watched Jimmy Kimmel, but I started looking at it because people would say how bad he is. I mean, literally, I think I was substantially funnier than him when I was 7 or 8 years old, right? I mean, literally, in sort of my comedic timing, my satire was a lot funnier than anything he's ever said. The other guy, Jimmy Fallon, I mean, he's painful to watch. Now, the only guy that I did follow in the past in terms of his career was Stephen Colbert, who at the time when he was with Jon Stewart, he really seemed to have a really spicy, unique delivery. And he's also gone completely off the deep end. And so now the only, quote, late night show that I watch, it's not even that late on, it's at 10 o'clock, is Gutfeld. And I usually watch Gutfeld, not so much for the interaction of all the guests, but his monologue is, I mean, I know Greg Gutfeld well. We've had dinner together. I've been on the show a few times. He is a smart guy, and he's a honey badger. He doesn't care. He tells it the way he sees it. But all of these other guys, not only are they no longer funny, but they're so wimpy, they're so castrated, they're so spineless. I can't stand it.
Well, Jimmy Fallon is irritating to watch because his shtick is laughing like a goof, and then it's not even funny. It's funny you mentioned Colbert because he was funny. Back when he had a sense of humor, but that's sort of a truism. It's back when he had some introspection. And Gad, I don't know if you have any specific insights on this. I find that the more liberal people get, the less funny they get, and it correlates to the more haughty they get, or the more self-absorbed they get. They lose their sense of humor, and I don't know if it's a correlation that I'm drawing, or if it's empirically justified. That the more seriously you take yourself, the less funny you become in life.
I agree. So a couple of things to mention here. So first of all, in one of the earlier chapters in The Parasitic Mind, I have a whole section on the power of satire. And there what I do is I explain the power of satire in the context of how I use it in my own public engagement, right? I use satire, sarcasm, ridicule, mockery, not because I'm a mean guy, but because there is nothing more effective in highlighting stupidity than the use of satire. I mean, this is why I always remind people that dictators usually, they don't first go after the guys with the big muscles. They go after the guys with the sharp tongues, right? That's why the maxim of the pen is mightier than the sword. It's because what is dangerous to your position of authority as a dictator is if somebody comes along and mocks you, satirizes you. So nothing could be uglier than that. So your point is well taken. I would add another dimension, actually coming from an evolutionary perspective. Self-deprecation, and I'm going to use fancy language, but then I'll explain it, is actually a costly signal of your confidence. Let me explain what
I know exactly what you're saying, and I love this. Okay, please go ahead.
Yeah. So a costly signal in evolutionary biology is the following. I often use the peacock's tail, but I could have given you 73 million other examples. The peacock's tail could not have evolved through natural selection. Natural selection is the mechanism that confers a survival advantage to an animal. Now, the reason why it's not through natural selection is because actually having that big, burdensome, conspicuous tail reduces your survivability. It makes you more conspicuous to predators. It makes it more difficult for you to take flight and escape from predators. Therefore, how could it have evolved? What it evolves through a dual mechanism called sexual selection, which is the evolutionary mechanism that confers reproductive advantage to an animal. Therefore, that peacock's tail is saying, despite my tail being burdensome, despite it being costly, I mean, literally costly in a physiological sense, but costly in that it reduces the likelihood of my surviving, I'm still standing here. Therefore, this must be an honest signal of my phenotypic quality. Therefore, ladies in the peahens, please pick me because I'm not a pretender. I'm not. So it's an incredibly powerful explanation of how many of these things evolve. So what now? Let's apply it to self-deprecation. If I am actually someone who's very self-assured, I don't have the fragility that would make it difficult for me to turn my satire and mockery against myself, right? So neither you and I are tall guys. And so I can make fun of the fact that I'm not 6'1" without it affecting my sense of self, because my confidence makes me actually 7 feet tall. And so when I start putting on weight, I can go on social media and say, all right, ladies and gentlemen, I think I have officially reached walrus status. Well, because I'm not insecure about myself, I can make fun of me having just put on weight. And so self-deprecation is an honest signal of true self-confidence. And to your point, having said all this, when you have these super acerbic, nasty progressives who are ultimately shaky about their ideologies, they can't turn it inwards and make fun of themselves, because that would require for you to be self-assured about your bullshit, and they're not self-assured. So what they'll do instead is they'll try to cancel you for having mocked them. God damn, just that right there was about $10,000 worth of tuition fee.
And I'm snipping and clipping that, and I want to turn it into not a short, but a segment for subsequent publication. The most important thing that you said there, I never realized that the female version of a peacock is called a peahen. I thought they were just both called peacocks. And now
all the stuff I said, that's what you were saying?
No, that it is amazing, because like it's my own self-reflection as well. Like, of course you could say whatever the hell you want about me, which is why like trolling doesn't exactly work, and not because I'm uber confident, but I think it's just because I'm uber realistic. But the people who feign outrage at every slight and every minor insult are the most insecure, fragile people on earth.
I want to read you something. Hold
Please.
on. Stay with me. I want to read you something from this guy. Now I am plugging my own stuff. Where is it? This way.
Oh, let me go get an Amazon link for this as you speak.
Yes, you better. Okay, here we go. I swear to God, I just opened by fluke, and it's exactly on the page that I wanted.
Yeah, people are gonna think we coordinated this like a fine dance before we went live.
Okay, so satire as the surgeon's scalpel. Okay, that's the title of the section on page 51 of the paperback edition of the Parasitic Mind. You ready?
Please. And now I've put the link for the book, the Amazon affiliate link. Get the book.
Thank you so much. There are several quotes here at the start of the section, but I'll read one for you. Quote, this is from Peter Sloterdijk. Okay, he's a philosopher.
His name is Sloterdijk?
Yeah, like Sloterdijk. Peter
Sloterdijk. Okay, that's an unfortunate name, but I guess it might be normal in another language. Okay.
So, but look how brilliant it is. How much truth is contained in something can be best determined by making it thoroughly laughable and then watching to see how much joking around it can take. For truth is a matter that can stand mockery, that is freshened by any ironic gesture directed at it. Whatever cannot stand satire is false. Close quote. I mean, is that a mic drop quote or what?
It is. Well, call me old-fashioned. The other one, which might be even shorter, is truth is like a lion. It needs not defending. Let it loose and it'll defend itself. But that's damn good. And by the way, the I didn't get your book. I got it on Audible because I only listened to the book.
Oh, right.
I've said this a number of times. The new one, Suicidal Empathy, you're going to do the voice for the audio book?
Oh, thank you for asking this. So in the first draft, so the Suicidal Empathy is with HarperCollins, which is, I guess, number 2 top publisher in the world. When they first sent me the contract, and having received so much abuse from readers and fans and Joe Rogan, because I hadn't read my last couple of books in self-narrated, but I tried to explain to people that it wasn't my choice to make. I made sure to change the clause in the draft of the HarperCollins that said, I reserve the right to self-narrate it. So at least I've done that. Now, I can't promise that they'll go with it, but at least it is included as a clause in the contract.
It must be. You have a unique voice. I'm not sure if I ever wrote a book if my voice is sufficiently unique, but there's some who have a distinctly unique voice, and you are certainly one of them.
Thank you.
But now, Gad, talking about tyrants who can't experience mockery, you're back in Montreal right now, right?
Regrettably, yes.
Every time I have a Canadian on, I say, like, is everything as bad up there as we think it is? The anti-Trump nonsense in Montreal, in Canada, it's as bad as it looks like on social media. We're not just seeing the filter up effects of it.
It's worse. So I joked, but it's true that Trump's powers are so magnificent that he was able to take a post-nation country like Canada. Remember, Trudeau told us that we are a post-nation country, right? Because he's a globalist. And he turned Canadians into being patriotic again by banding them together against mean, nasty United States and Trump. So he managed to make Canadians patriotic. But now here's the bad part. Okay, I mean, there's nothing wrong with being patriotic. Here's the bad part. Typical interaction I have with fans who come up to me on the street, let's say in my neighborhood. Oh, Dr. Saad, I'm such a massive fan. I love everything you stand for. I love everything about you. Everything. Thank you so much for your work. My answer, thank you. That's very, very kind. Thank you for the kind words. Do you mind if I ask who you're going to be voting for in the next federal election? Oh, I'm voting for liberals, Professor Saad. How the hell did you just finish saying thank you for everything that you stand for, when everything that I stand for is the perfect antithesis of what the liberals who are illiberal stand for? But that shows you the disconnect that happens in the minds of most Canadians.
What's driving me nuts is that people are stupid enough, and I'm being mean to liberals, I guess. Anybody who's stupid enough to vote for a liberal is an idiot who has learned nothing from the last 9 years. Now, it's not to say that I would endorse Pierre Poilievre, because I don't and won't, but you'd have to be stupid to continue voting for the very party that has destroyed you for the last decade, only because you don't know that the guy that's replaced him, was behind the scenes the entire time advising Trudeau. So it's not even as though he's better than Trudeau. I'm not sure which podcast it was I was listening to you, where you're like, he's a little bit better than Trudeau because Trudeau's the worst. I think he's worse than Trudeau because he is Trudeau's guiding policy behind the back scenes, and he is the successful globalist whore that Justin Trudeau is aspiring to be. You have to be an idiot to vote for the Liberals, period. And the fact that I'm looking at the markets and it's like 60% now of the markets think that it's going to be a Liberal prime minister, I'm despaired. And it seems that it's motivated by this anti-Trump derangement syndrome in Canada, who has got bigger problems to worry about than what Trump is doing in America, or even the fear of what he might do to Canada through tariffs. I have a theory about this, that it's It's a self-defense mechanism where Canadians cannot control their own misery, so the only thing they can do is redirect the anger as a result of their uncontrolled misery by pointing it at a boogeyman who they then get to blame for the misery they're experiencing and have experienced for the last 10 years, even though they know deep down he's not the cause.
Beautiful analysis. I couldn't agree more. I mean, think about it. You're upset, but I mean, now Trump has, sort of softened his position to argue, for reciprocal tariffs, which again, if you are a perfectly knowledgeable evolutionist, you'd recognize, as I explained in Suicidal Empathy, that reciprocity is a foundational Darwinian mechanism that shapes all sorts of social interactions. I mean, literally, social grooming that is found in primates, right? I scratch your back, you scratch mine. I mean, what do you see with primates? The primate comes, gives their back to his friend, who then picks off the ticks and the parasites that he otherwise couldn't reach, with the understanding that once you're done grooming me, I'll reciprocate and offer you that service. So in several of my earlier books in evolutionary psychology, I talk about the importance of reciprocity as a foundational, fundamental Darwinian mechanism that oils social bonds. So it makes perfect evolutionary sense to me that if you impose 100% tariff on me, then it's certainly not onerous that I would impose the exact same one on you. But notwithstanding that argument, you're getting upset at Trump for levying tariffs, but you're quiet at the astounding parasitic taxation system that we are under in Canada. How is that? I mean, if the currency that you are trying to optimize is how much money should be left in your pocket, who is the greater thief of the size of your wallet? Is it Donald Trump in the last 6 weeks, or is it what you are faced in terms of taxation in Canada? Now, here's the problem. It's a quite an important problem when it comes to, say, trying to create collusions amongst people. Many people in Canada benefit from parasitic taxation. And therefore, when I go on social media and I rail against all my money being stolen from me, the typical answer I get, which really, I mean, genuinely not only kills me, it hurts me,
let me say, not all your money, just half of your money.
No, actually, it's more than half. It's much more than half. I get, well, what's the big, why are you such a pig? Why are you so greedy? Why can't you share your wealth with the rest of us? So if 95% of Canadians are the net beneficiary of the taxation Ponzi scheme, it's left to the 5% like me to support the rest of the Ponzi pyramid, right? And so I don't think we'll ever get rid of the parasitic taxation because too many people benefit from it. And so I hear you, it's completely insane. But unfortunately, Canadians are very, very likely to make the same mistake again with Carney.
I will do my best to make sure it doesn't happen. But I got into a bit of a fight with a guy named Harry Faulkner, who's a journalist, and they fault me for leaving, or people fault me for leaving, and I do appreciate 50% of that is not envy, but the anger that they can't leave despite the fact that they want to. And then there's probably a bunch who say they're going to sit there and fight. And I'm like, do you think I'm going to pay 50% of whatever I make to the government so they can tyrannize me, brutalize my children? And it's somehow that's more patriotic for me to go finance the abusive machine than vote with my feet. And we pay a lot of tax here because you still pay it to the federal. But you have to be stupid to finance your abusers if you have the option.
Again, sorry, go ahead. Finish your point.
No. I was going to get back to the tariffs, but go ahead, please.
I was going to say there's nothing that angers me more than the discussion of taxation, but I'm happy to do it even though there's going to be a noticeable increase in my blood pressure as I try to say this. Look, 1917 in Canada was the first time that income taxes was levied in 1917. And it was meant to be for a very, very short time period, very small amount from a very few people, because of the war stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And similar history in the United States and so on, right? 120 years later, it's only gotten worse and never gotten better, right? So we start with a very, very small temporary thing, then it grows to more. By the way, you said it's 50%. It actually is not. right? The highest progressive tax rate at the federal level is 33%. The highest at the Quebec level is 25%. So 25 and 33. Now remember that. Now, so if you're making over a certain amount, you're getting taxed at that rate, right? Now, let's add the fact that when you're taxing me on this, there is something unique about taxing my mind. It's not I bought this for $1 and I sold it for $2. Any taxation is painful, but taxing my mind, my words, my theories, when most of the royalties were made outside of Canada and you keep 58%, that is a unique level of debauchery, right?
Well, it's
Now hold on, we're not finished. Now I'm left with 42%. Now you'd say, you know what? The government has taken enough. By the way, they taxed me already on my professorial salary, much more than 50%. But now I went out and wrote best-selling books. You tax me more and more. Now you'd say, okay, maybe you feel a sense of shame. No more. No. The 42% that I'm left with, when I go out and buy stuff, you tax me 15% on that, both sales tax provincial and federal. But it doesn't end there. Then you tax me carbon tax. Yes, Carney's trying to remove it. And you tax me school tax and property tax and so on. So once I end up with all of the taxes, I'm roughly left with 30 cents to the dollar. So that someone like me, who by any measure is a very, very successful member of society, when I look at the end of the year at what I have left in money, I go, where's the money? How come I was such a successful author? How come I can't retire? How come I don't have any money? Well, because the government is an empathetic government that doesn't think it's fair for you to be more successful than others. They will take your money and redistribute it properly.
It is enraging. And Gad, as someone who has broken the residency requirement, there is that exit tax, which they gleefully charge you a deemed disposition of the value of your assets, which you may or may not have, and that's what you have to pay when you leave. It's criminal, period. And people don't really understand just how bad it is up in Canada, because it's not like the 47 to 50% of your income. Then you got 15% sales tax, and you say property tax, mutation tax, hidden taxes, license fee renewal, passport renewal. It's endless chipping away, and then they go and what do they do with it? Squander it on foreign countries, on foreign conflict, and whatever. The issue with the tariffs, and I brought up someone in chat said Canada wouldn't be so pissed if they weren't systematically exploiting the U.S. The idea with what the hypocrisy that drives me nuts. Poiliev comes out and says, I'm standing up for Canadians, so we're going to impose retaliatory tariffs. Canadians don't seem to understand tariffs on chicken, milk, poultry, meat in the U.S. It's been like 200, 300% that they've imposed on American imports to prop up the Canadian market. And all of a sudden, Trump comes in and says, I want to stand up for Americans. He's a traitor to Canadians, as though he ever had an obligation to them. But when Canadians fight back, then it's defending Canadian jobs. It's predicated on ignorance is the bottom line.
Well, it's predicated on ignorance, and it's predicated on a sense of entitlement that's difficult to comprehend, right? There is something in decision making called rational choice theory, right? Rational actor theory, which basically says that all other things equal, it makes perfect sense, and certainly evolutionary sense, that people or actors look out for their best interest. I mean, it's at the root of Ayn Rand's objectivism, right? Quote, selfish, interests, right? So why would it seem, why can't you have theory of mind as a Canadian and say, in the same way that we benefit from this, they've decided to stop the gravy train. By the way, when I tell that to Canadians, I'm treated as though I'm treasonous, right? Because a logical person should just say that Donald Trump is Himmler, and the fact that he is trying to negotiate a better deal for his people proves that he's Himmler. By the way, my 16-year-old daughter went to see her physiotherapist because she was having knee problems, which she has been having, endemically now because of soccer. That physiotherapist took the opportunity to start lecturing for 20, 30 minutes my daughter, because my daughter said that, yes, we often vacation in the United States. My dad has a visiting professorship there. And then the physiotherapist tells my daughter in a very condescending and patronizing way, "Oh, sweetie, it looks like you've drank the Kool-Aid." Meaning, like, right? No rational person could ever have anything good to say about the United States. But, you're just a moronic child. That might explain why you're aping your dad's favorite position towards the United States. It's maddening.
No, that pisses me right off beyond the point of no return. Were you present when the doctor?
I wasn't, but
because it would have been bad either way. The audacity to do it in front of the parent, but the audacity to do it when the parent is not there is beyond words. Like, not that this doctor might be very well versed in politics, to indoctrinate somebody else's kid in the absence of the parent, where the parent is not. That's enraging. I had a similar experience with at least one of my doctors who has now gone off the deep end in terms of off the deep end. This was my GP who he checked my prostate. And then I'm sure if he did it now, he would deliberately cause some additional harm. People they've lost their ever loving minds, and I don't know how you come back from it, but I don't know where it stops. I mean, where does Canada go from here?
Yeah, I really don't know. I think that, the demographic shifts that have happened in Canada, I fear that they are irreversible. I mean, there is a pathway to reverse them, but there is no stomach to do such cataclysmic changes, right? I mean, absolutely deport anyone who exhibits any ideological commitment to any belief system that is contrary to our foundational values. They're back on that plane. I don't give a shit what papers they have. But, I mean, there is such a thing as being seditious, right? I mean, that word does exist, right? So, but you have to have the courage to be able to invoke such things, right? Now, the reality is that Canada is changing in ways, as I know you know, Viva, in ways that are simply astounding. And I may have mentioned this before, and if I have, forgive me for repeating, but maybe I haven't. From 1975, when we first moved to Canada from Lebanon, to 1998, and the only reason I know that it's 1998 because it was an episodic memory, which I'll explain in a second, meaning that I retained it in my long-term memory. From 1975 to 1998, I had never seen a single woman veiled, not one. In 1998, I saw one downtown, and I said, "Oh my God, I haven't seen this in decades. I've never seen this." From 1998 to today, I can walk down on any street and anywhere in Montreal, and 30, 40, 50% of the women are veiled. Now, that didn't happen over a 500-year period. It happened over 2 decades. So what are the numbers that must have occurred over the past 2 decades to completely alter my sense of belonging in the society, right? Now, I could have easily argued that, look, and there's an area in Montreal called Outremont, which, of course, maybe your viewers don't.
It's the Black Hatter Jewish neighborhood.
Exactly. It's the Black Hatters. It's Orthodox Jews. Now, they are restricted to a very, very small area, and that's fine. That's great. Live and let live. Now, imagine if overnight, over the past 20 years, 1 out of every 2 people that I saw in Montreal was Hasidim, right? Well, I could also say, you know what? I never signed up to be in an ultra-Orthodox society. So it's not. So I don't need to hear the bullshit from people. "Oh, but you're Islamophobic." First of all, there is no such thing as Islamophobia. But the reality is, many of us, literally escaped that world so that we could have that ideology in the rearview mirror. And now I can't escape it, right? For example, at my home university, for many, many years that I was there, we never had to have any meetings regarding religious accommodations. In 2011, I was asked to be on a university-wide committee, which was stupid of them to ask me to be on it. They asked me to be on a committee in order for us to now navigate religious accommodation issues. And I brought up the point right there in front of everybody while everybody put their head down and started shuffling their paper, pretending they didn't hear me speak. I said, "I'm wondering, why is it that we have called for this religious accommodation meeting now? Has something happened at Concordia or in Montreal or in Quebec that necessitates that we've had this?" Everybody, of course, we all knew what it was, but nobody was willing to say what it was. So cultures and religions have specific belief systems. Some of those belief systems might be perfectly consistent with the the belief systems of the host society, and some might be perfectly antithetical. It doesn't take a fancy professor to make that point, and yet, regrettably, our immigration policy has been one that says all immigrants are equally likely to assimilate, and Canada will forevermore bear the brunt of that decision.
Well, what's amazing in Cryptus brought this up. Because I remember it when Trudeau said Canada has no core identity.
Yes.
And I remember people calling Canada a post-nation state. I never really understood what it meant. And now all of a sudden,
all this in suicidal empathy, by the way. But go ahead.
yeah. So everybody. I mean, it's suicidal empathy. Sorry, I'm thinking of Parasitic Mind.
Yeah.
Everybody must read it. What was I about to say though? It was about the no core identity. Oh yes, that's right. And talking about like the Orwellian tearing up the script mid-speech and just going the other way, and everybody pretends that that's what they were saying all along. And the going back to the concept from the beginning. The flag during the Ottawa protest was considered a far-right extremist Russian-financed object that the right was exploiting to claim patriotism while they were secretly far-right extremists. CBC ran an article. They said the word freedom has become the rallying call for the far-right. It might have been CNN. It's one of the propagandist rags. And now all of a sudden, it's like they take the flag, they take the word freedom, they take the word nationalism, and they adopt it and make it their own, despite what they've been saying for the last 10 years. But you said they had the religious accommodation thing in 2011.
Yeah.
What did happen in that year?
I think it was well, I mean, what was happening certainly at Concordia is, I mean, look, Concordia for certainly well over 20 plus years has been colloquially referred to as Gaza University, right? I mean,
someone said it in the chat. I was going to bring it up, but I don't want to look like I was being overtly controversial. Yeah, I remember in 2000 when I was at McGill, it was 2001, and I think it was Netanyahu. I think
2002. I think
2002 when he came to speak, and there were protests, and they prevented him from speaking in 2002. I was luckily at McGill, which was the reasonable university, but I think that's fallen off the cliff as well. Sorry, go on.
Yeah. So I think what happened is that, look, before I answer what happened, let me give a personal story. And this probably is mid 80s. I was a very competitive soccer player. I think we were playing a semi-final maybe of the Quebec Cup in what's called the Premier League in Quebec. And it just so happened that the game was happening at the start of Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur, for those of you who don't know, is the highest holiday in Judaism. It's about a 25-hour fast, full fast, right? No water, no food,
no brushing your teeth, people.
No brushing your teeth, no nothing.
The rules.
Okay. Now, I had a game, and at the time, I mean, it's now been a few years that I haven't done Kippur, but from about the age of 10, 11 till about maybe 10 years ago, I had an uninterrupted adherence to Yom Kippur. And so 1985, 86, I would have certainly been in the midst of always adhering to Yom Kippur. And so I had to go to a game. I had to play that game without ever drinking or hydrating at that game, and then waited 25 hours. And I mean, literally, you could die from it, okay, in terms of dehydration, right? And yet, I didn't have the reflex to say, change the schedule to fit my religion. All the years that I have been a professor, even though it was my right to not go to school and teach on the days where it was high holidays, I didn't think it was appropriate of me to do that, because that's my problem. I'm at a secular university in a secular society. That's the cost I have to bear. I don't impose it on others. So look at the difference in mentality. My burden of my religion is mine alone to bear, not to be imposed on others for them to accommodate my things. But then the beautiful, noble religion of Islam comes along and very quickly says, no. When you are in our society, you adhere to our wishes. And when we come to your society, you adhere to our wishes. Got it? Any questions? And that's what you see. And as the numbers increase, those encroachments become a lot more ominous. Today, as I predicted all along, you now have closing of streets for mass prayers. Go back and see if I predicted that. It's all a numbers game. When there's only 2 or 3 of us, but why, God? I'm just a poor minority. Ya Allah, why? Right? You get it? But once we become a lot more, we're a lot more forceful. And then one day you wake up, oops, you live in an Islamic society.
I appreciate, first of all, the historical argument to that and the examples of it. I know just the pushback would be the rules of like why food is kosher when there's only 1.5% of the population who are Jewish. The pushback would be, what if the eruv, the little string that they put around neighborhoods? And some people would say, look, it was always my view as well. I went to 3 different high schools, one of which was a very, I think it was Protestant. It was called Lower Canada College. And I was rebellious for the sake of being rebellious, but when people got upset that they had tryouts on Yom Kippur, I was like, if you want to live in a Jewish state, you can go live in the Jewish state, especially if you want to go to a school that is fundamentally Protestant of origin. I'm going to feel really stupid if it was Catholic. Doesn't matter. That's the way I felt. I know that people are going to say, however, that the same can be said to say a much lesser extent of the Jewish community as well, where you get holidays for Jewish holidays in non-Jewish societies, and that would be one of the flaws or the faults that they would levy against the Jewish community, just materializing in a different way.
I mean, it's also a matter of how you go about imposing those requests, right? I mean, the sheer numbers of the number of Jews that there is in the world versus the number of Muslims is an important fact to incorporate into the discussion. It's about 125 to 1, right? So, for example, but by the way, this is going to come to this point in a second. A few days ago, I posted a clip of what looked like a woman completely covered so that her identity was erased. And it turned, somebody wrote, "Oh, you moron. You just shared a photo of Jewish woman, Jewish sect." Okay. Well, even if that is the case, I don't support that, right? I don't support the erasure of women if they are done by Jews or done by anybody else. That said, the number of Jewish women that adhere to this can roughly be counted on maybe not the totality of the 10 fingers. The number of women that have this imposed on them on Islam is, say in the order of a couple of 100 million. So then numbers matter. Yes, it's also disastrous for the 10 Jewish women that are forced to have their identities erased. But in the same way that a 2-pound person is overweight and a 200-pound person is overweight, the fact that we use the word overweight for both doesn't mean that we don't also recognize the scale of how much you're overweight. But of course, for the degenerates, those kinds of nuances are lost.
Well, and speaking of which, it was I want to refresh my memory as to the year, but it was the question as to whether or not new immigrants to Canada would have to take their veil off for the purposes of the swearing in ceremony, and I even think for photographs. And yeah, I mean, look, I've always been of this opinion, and it's not specific to any one religion or anything. It's like, you want to live in Quebec, speak French, and if you don't want to speak French, get the hell out. If you don't like a French province, don't live there. There's plenty of places to live. But no, Montreal, Concordia has always been very progressive to the point of over the top. And I think all of Montreal has gotten that way. But the demographics of Canada now, and I was talking about this recently with someone, it's 1 in 4 people in Canada are born outside of Canada. And I don't know how you forget cohesion. There are European white, immigrants that if you brought them in certain numbers, you'd have problems and you'd have reactions. It's not from anyone, it's from a cohesion of assimilation to the values of that country. And I think Canada's now, I think it's beyond a point of no return. I don't know how you come back from this.
I agree. But I wrote an article a while ago, which I titled, the key concept was cultural homophily. Homophily is the liking of similar others, right? And you find this kind of effect in many, many contexts. So, for example, in evolutionary psychology, we have something called assortative mating. Assortative mating is the idea of birds of a feather flock together. So, and I discussed this in this book. Oh, wait a minute. This book right here.
That's the other one. That was the Sad Truth.
The Sad Truth about happiness. So, in that book, I talk about a fundamental decision that you'll make that will either impart great happiness or great misery upon you is choosing the right spouse. And there I talk about 2 opposing maxims when it comes to mate choice. Either birds of a feather flock together or opposites attract. Mm-hmm. And the research overwhelmingly supports the birds of a feather being the correct maxim, certainly for long-term
marriage. I mean, the opposites attract is probably good for short-term sex.
That's exactly what I was going to say. If we're looking for a short-term mating opportunity, I may be, sexually introverted. You may be sexually extroverted. That complementarity might work well, and it might be great. But for long-term happiness, it's birds of a feather flock together. Now the question is, flocking on which feathers? We're talking about the foundational values that animate and our lives, right? If I am very strong in my religion and you happen to be, caustically atheist, well, even though we'd like to think that love conquers all, we're probably putting the stats against us, given that our difference in worldview regarding religion as being part of our daily lives, okay? So why am I saying all this? So we know that homophily, preferring someone similar to you, happens in mate choice. It happens in friendship networks. It even happens in how you choose your dog. So there's great research that shows that if you take photos of human owners and their dogs, but you don't match them, you just put 5 here, and you ask people to match which one goes with whom, people are able to match them at much above chance level, meaning that we even assort on the type. That's why, for example, I have Belgian Shepherds, because Belgian Shepherds are extremely good looking, very aristocratic, very regal, very majestic, and it would make sense that I would be the owner. You see how I can deliver that with a straight face? So you see, so now why am I saying all this? Well, apply that principle to choosing immigrants, homophily, right? All other things equal, if we have shared linguistic heritage, it puts one tick in our favor. If we have shared history when it comes to individual freedoms, that's another one. If we have shared interests in living in a secular society, that's another one. So all other things equal, somebody from Denmark who's indigenously Danish is on average more likely to fit in within an Anglo-Saxon society than someone from Sana'a, Yemen. Not because Yemen doesn't have lovely people, but they are equipped with a set of religious and cultural baggage that some might be consistent with Canada, others may be perfectly inconsistent with Canada. It doesn't take a very fancy evolutionary behavioral scientist to tell us that. So now if you import hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people who come from societies where Pew survey has found that 95% to 99% of people polled from those societies have endemic Jew hatred in their heart. Does it take a fancy professor to tell you that after a few years, you're going to have an increase in Jew hatred in the host society? Oh, gee, how could that have happened? Well, it doesn't take much to predict that, right? So now they're setting up task force to understand what has led to this Jew hatred. What could it be? Well, I mean, could it be because you've let in millions of people whose definitional metric is their Jew hatred?
No, it's people will accuse you for emphasizing the Jew aspect of this. You can look to Sweden and it doesn't materialize as Jew hatred, but rather materializes as women's rights issues. And you have problems in which may or may not be specific Jew hatred, but rather also and including intercultural problems that occur among the very same people that are coming in, who then import their local domestic strife into Canadian politics, which I believe we're seeing in certain parts of Canada, cities I shan't mention. Gad, you look like you're gonna.
Reading? What?
No, no, forget that. The blood pressure might be up. It's tongue in cheek, but I mean, I guess I did. What are you doing, and what are your plans for how to address this? Because at some point, I mean, people may fault me for having jumped ship, although I haven't too early. At some point, there's a point of no return where the government might say, "We like you here too much, Gad, and we're gonna take everything if you want to leave."
No, look, you and I have talked about this privately, but I'm happy to discuss it publicly. It's been many years that I've realized that my family's future is not in Canada. It's people say, "Well, why don't you leave then?" Well, because there are other constraints. My wife's parents live here. My parents live here. I was a I am a tenured professor here. It's not easy to pack your bags and leave and dismantle, everything you did with your graduate students who are still there and so on. So it's not as easy as you'd like to think. But I really am getting to the place now where if I don't do it now, I will certainly regret it if I wait any longer. So I'm here to tell you, and I think I've already mentioned this on social media, so I'm not breaking any new ground. I've already received several offers from very, very alluring universities in the United States. So now I'm weighing my various options, and I suspect that I don't know exactly when, whether it'll be next year or the year after, but I feel as though my time here is truly numbered.
It's at some point it'll be a question of fleeing a country and claiming asylum for meaningful purposes. Just you have time for a few more questions?
Sure, go for it.
Okay,
Doctor, I read it or?
Oh, and I'll read it. It says Dr. Gad Saad needs to relocate to Switzerland like so many others to avoid being devoured by taxation dragons. The amazing thing is, it's like the Canadian politicians have already figured this out. This is why a lot of them have offshore accounts. This is why we're going to find out what globalist Mark Carney's finances are about, what his assets are, what he's been investing in while advising Trudeau to cripple the Canadian economy. Did the physiotherapist offer his daughter for being an American sympathizer? I just did an interview with Kelsey Sharon. Have you ever had Kelsey Sharon on?
I haven't, no.
Oh, I'll put you two in touch. It's amazing because we talked in depth about maids, and it's a topic which YouTube doesn't at all want to let flourish on its own because people don't know what's going on in Canada. The left have gone way too far off their reservation. They're embracing tribalism to an extreme degree, to which I now believe either civil wars or purges will occur across the West, or something of a divorce where I don't know what states you're looking at, but states are going to have immigration and emigration that's going to reflect their political leanings. But the only question is, at the community level, when you have doctors who are taking it upon themselves to indoctrinate the children of their patients, you're gonna have factions and breaking up at a micro level, not just a macro level.
Look, I definitely, I actually do. I don't think it'll be a separation. I think there, if this continues, and I've said this for decades now, there will be civil war. Now, people say, "Oh, come on, that's hyperbolic. What are you talking about?" The reality is that I can't predict whether it'll happen in 15 years or 22 years or 29 years. But push this reality to an extreme, people will eventually wake up, right? I mean, it always happens. What I always try to do is warn people so that the autocorrection happens peacefully. But with every day that passes, the chances of that happening peacefully are diminished, right? Because the dynamics change, and it becomes that the only autocorrection has to be a muscular one, a violent one. And so I don't hold out big hopes. Look, we didn't think these things would happen in all sorts of societies where the dynamics that we're now seeing in Canada happen. Like right in Lebanon, we lived very nicely until we didn't, right? And why didn't we? Well, in Lebanon, it used to be a majority Christian country during my lifetime, right? 60, 70% Christians. Now it's the exact opposite, right? And that's what happens in every society where Islam goes. Now, it might take 2 years to purge everybody who's not Muslim, or it might take 200 years. But once Islam makes a sufficient incursion into a society, there is no reversal, right? This is why when you look at the 56 countries that are members of the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, most of them are 99, 100%, 98% Islamic. Each of those societies was once 0% Muslim. How did it turn into 99 and 100? Well, at times it's very quick. At other times it takes hundreds of years, but it will happen. And I assure you, it will happen in Canada. Maybe not in our lifetime, but it will happen.
Gad, what do you have next on the? Everybody, by the way, stay tuned. I'm going to stick on. I got some links that we're going to look at after Gad leaves. But what do you have coming up on your schedule?
Well, tomorrow I'm appearing on. If you guys, I'm assuming many of you know who Dr. Scott Atlas is. He's one of the guys who was on Trump's administration in his first term. He's a radiologist out of Stanford who spoke out against a lot of the COVID insanity. So I'll be appearing on his show tomorrow. I'm also appearing on Will Kane now has a 4:00 show that replaced Cavuto on Fox. I'll be appearing on his show. Next week, I'm back to trying to work on suicidal empathy. I've traveled so much the last 6 weeks that I haven't been able to do much writing. So I'm really looking forward to going back to the cafe and being creative and productive. So those are the most immediate things on my docket.
Excellent. Now, when I'm done with this, I'm going to put up all your links, Gad, and everybody can go find they know who you are. They'll find you, find Parasitic Mind, and everybody will eagerly await suicidal empathy, a concept that has already gone mainstream before the book even came out.
Look, I can do a search and it comes out in 60 languages. And so once in a while, just to excite my publisher, I will write to them and I say, you're welcome, because you're about to break some sales record. I mean, if the current indications are accurate, I think, God willing, it's going to smash the success of Parasitic Mind.
I'm going to ask, I'm going to see if I can find the Google Trends for the term parasitic mind, because something tells me it's going to be flatline and then very recently a spike. Gad, thank you. Please come back on again whenever you can. And I may not meet you in Montreal. You'll come and meet me in Florida.
From your lips to God's ear. Thank you so much.
All right. Have a good one.
You too.
That was amazing, people. Hey, Encryptus, can we pull up the Google trend on Parasitic Mind? Not Parasitic Mind, on suicidal empathy? So my joke... Go for it, sir.
You said on it.
Okay, awesome. I made the joke that, like, Gad came up with the term suicidal empathy, which is I'll be empathetic to the point where it causes my own demise. And then I was like, well, I think we might have gone to the point where it's now homicidal empathy. We're like, I'm going to kill you because of the righteousness. But I'm like, oh, that's just what it was always like before. Gad is amazing, people. Thoroughly, unequivocally amazing. Now, let me see. I didn't get all of the Rumble rants this way, but because I see King of Biltong in the house, and Gad said, look at this beautiful picture. I know this. He must be particularly happy with this photograph that exists on the internet.